She's filming him on her phone, watching her son move strangely around their living room, his eyes unfocused, his words making no sense. Suzanne Henry thinks she'll show him the footage tomorrow morning, proof of what the drugs are doing to him, another plea to make him stop. But in 6 minutes, everything will change. In 6 minutes, the phone will fall. In 6 minutes, her son will pick it up again, and his face will be covered in blood. Her blood. This is the story of Finn Henry, a 21 years old from Madley, Staffordshire, who told his friends he was dancing with the devil hours before he killed the person who loved him most. It's a story about addiction, psychosis, and a mother's desperate attempts to save her son from himself. And it's a story that asks a question many of us would rather not face. What happens when the person you're trying to save becomes the person you should fear? So what really happened inside that house on Newcastle Road? And could anyone have stopped it? Finn Henry was born and raised in Madeley, a small town in Staffordshire, part of the borough of Newcastle under Lyme. It's the kind of place where people know their neighbours, where families stay for generations, where life moves at a quieter pace than in the big cities. Finn grew up in a stable home with his mother Suzanne, his father, and his sister. By all accounts, it was a loving household. And Finn had talents. He was an experienced amateur boxer, someone who trained regularly, who understood discipline and physical control. Boxing requires focus, dedication, and respect for your own body and your opponent's. It's a sport that teaches you to channel aggression constructively, to stay calm under pressure, to think strategically even when your heart is pounding. Finn knew all of this. He had spent years learning it. But there was something else growing inside him, something that would eventually overpower every lesson he'd ever learned. When Finn was just 16 years old, he tried ketamine for the first time. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic, a drug used legally in hospitals and veterinary clinics to sedate patients and manage pain. But on the street, it's known as a party drug, something that makes you feel detached from your body, from reality, from the world around you. In small doses, it can create a dreamy, floaty sensation. In larger doses, it can cause what users call the K-hole, a state of complete dissociation, where you lose all sense of who or where you are. And with regular use, it can cause serious psychological damage, including psychosis, paranoia, and hallucinations. Finn didn't just try ketamine once, he became addicted. By the time he was 21, he was using it regularly, compulsively, despite the pleas from his family and friends to stop. He also used cocaine and cannabis, mixing substances in ways that made his behavior increasingly unpredictable. His mother, Suzanne, begged him to quit. She watched him slip further and further away, watched the son she knew disappear behind glazed eyes and erratic moods. She tried everything she could think of to pull him back. But addiction doesn't listen to love. It doesn't care how much someone wants you to stop. And Finn's addiction was deepening, pulling him into a place where reality itself was starting to fracture. And on the afternoon of 1st of May, the year 2023, something inside Finn's mind snapped completely. What do you think happens when someone you love becomes unrecognizable, when the person you've known your whole life starts to seem like a stranger? Suzanne Henry faced that question every day. Suzanne Henry was 54 years old when she died. She had lived her entire adult life in Madeley, raising her children, building a home, becoming part of the fabric of her community. She was known as a warm, caring woman, someone who took her responsibilities seriously but never lost her sense of humor or her capacity for kindness. She was a mother who loved fiercely, who believed in setting boundaries but also in offering second chances, who never gave up on her children even when things got hard. And things had gotten hard. Watching Finn spiral into addiction had been one of the most painful experiences of Suzanne's life. She had tried everything she could think of to help him. She had talked to him, pleaded with him, set rules, offered support, connected him with services. She had watched him promise to stop and then relapse. She had seen the light in his eyes dim as the drugs took hold. And she had never, not once, stopped trying to save him. People who knew Suzanne described her as firm but fair, a phrase that captures something essential about her parenting style. She wasn't permissive. She didn't let bad behavior slide. But she also wasn't cruel or cold. She believed in accountability, but she also believed in love, in the possibility of change, in the idea that people could turn their lives around if they were given the right support and encouragement. She was the kind of mother who would film her son's erratic behavior, not to shame him, but to show him the next day what the drugs were doing to him, to give him concrete evidence of why he needed to stop. That's what she was doing on the evening of 1st of May, the year 2023. She was filming Finn as he moved around their living room, loud and excitable, his behaviour clearly influenced by whatever substances he had taken that day. She was documenting it, planning to sit him down the next morning and say, Look at what this is doing to you. Look at who you become when you're using. It was an act of love, an act of desperation, an act of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time he would see it, and something would click, and he would finally choose to get clean. Suzanne had no way of knowing that there wouldn't be a next morning. So what exactly happened that night? The day started like so many others had in recent months, with Finn Henry already deep in the grip of his addiction. On the afternoon of 1st of May, the year 2023, at around 3 p.m., Finn's girlfriend met him at a Morrisons supermarket in the area. What she saw alarmed her immediately. Finn was going in and out of consciousness, falling to the ground, hitting his head. He was barely able to stand, barely able to speak coherently. She called an ambulance, frightened by what she was witnessing. When the paramedics arrived, Finn told them he had taken ketamine. He also admitted that he hadn't been taking his prescribed medication for anxiety and depression, a dangerous combination that left his mind vulnerable and unstable. The paramedics wanted to take him to hospital, to get him checked out, to make sure he was safe, but Finn refused. He was worried, he said, that his mother would go mad if she found out what had happened. So instead of getting help, instead of being monitored by medical professionals, Finn left the scene and went for a drive with friends. And that's when things started to get truly frightening. As Finn drove, his friends noticed that something was very wrong. He was talking to himself, screaming, making weird noises. He was, in their words, completely out of it. One friend later described him as seeming like he was in another world entirely, disconnected from reality, lost in some internal nightmare that none of them could see or understand. And then Finn started talking about the apocalypse. He started saying he needed to disappear for a bit. He told his friends he was fully dancing with the devil and that he didn't want to do something he would regret. Think about that phrase for a moment. Dancing with the devil. It's not just a figure of speech. It's a window into what was happening inside Finn's mind, the way the drugs had twisted his perception of reality, the way he was starting to see the world through a lens of paranoia and fear and darkness. He knew, on some level, that he was losing control. He knew that something terrible was building inside him, and he told his friends to get out of the car. At around 7:30 p.m., Finn dropped his friends off and told them he was going home to get some sleep. They were worried about him, but they didn't know what else to do. They didn't know that Finn wasn't going home to sleep. They didn't know that when he walked through the door of his house on Newcastle Road, he was already deep in a drug-induced psychosis, already seeing things that weren't there, already losing his grip on who he was and who the people around him were. Suzanne was in the living room when Finn came home. She could see immediately that something was wrong. Her son was loud, excitable, moving erratically, his behavior clearly influenced by whatever he had taken, and so she did what she had done before. She picked up her phone and started filming him, documenting his behavior so she could show him the next day, so she could give him proof of what the drugs were doing to him. The video shows Finn in an agitated state, his movements jerky and unpredictable, and then, suddenly, he throws 2 punches at the camera. The phone falls, and for 6 minutes, the camera records only audio, only the sounds of what happens next. What happened in those 6 minutes is almost too horrific to comprehend. Finn, in the grip of a complete psychotic break, no longer saw his mother when he looked at Suzanne. He saw, according to later testimony, a demon or a devil. The woman sitting on the sofa, the woman who had raised him, loved him, tried to save him, had become in his fractured mind something monstrous, something threatening, something that needed to be destroyed. He attacked her with a ferocity that shocked even experienced investigators. He punched her repeatedly in the head and face, using the boxing skills he had spent years developing, skills that were meant to be used in a ring with rules and referees and protective equipment. He strangled her as she sat on the sofa, cutting off her air, cutting off her ability to scream or fight back or call for help. For 6 minutes, Suzanne Henry endured an assault so brutal that when paramedics later arrived, They could not tell from her facial injuries whether she was male or female. And then, after 6 minutes, Finn picked up the phone. The camera captured his face. He was covered in blood, Suzanne's blood. A neighbor heard the shouting and banging. They looked outside and saw Finn, topless, standing in the driveway, looking confused. And then he ran. He tried to get into various properties nearby, his mind still fractured, still lost in whatever nightmare the drugs had created. Eventually, he returned to the scene. By then, someone had called the police. When officers arrived at 9:46 p.m., they found Finn acting suspiciously in the street. He had blood on him. He appeared to be under the influence of drugs. He was arrested immediately. But he was deemed not medically fit to be interviewed until the following day. His system still flooded with ketamine, his mind still unable to process reality clearly. Inside the house, a neighbor who knew the family had found Suzanne. She was badly injured, with significant trauma to her face and head. Paramedics rushed her to the Royal Stoke University Hospital, working desperately to save her life, but the injuries were too severe. On 3rd of May, the year 2023, 2 days after the attack, Suzanne Henry died from a traumatic brain injury. The investigation that followed was thorough and heartbreaking. Detectives had to piece together what had happened in those 6 minutes, had to listen to the audio from Suzanne's phone, and had to interview Finn once he was finally coherent enough to speak. And what they discovered was a tragedy that could have been prevented, a death that was the result of addiction, mental illness, and a system that failed to intervene before it was too late. Could anyone have seen this coming? Could anyone have stopped it? Those are the questions that haunt everyone involved in this case. Finn's friends knew he was struggling. His family knew he was addicted. Medical professionals had seen him that very afternoon, but no one could have predicted that by the end of the day, Suzanne Henry would be dead and her son would be a killer. What happens when love isn't enough? What happens when all the warnings, all the interventions, all the desperate attempts to save someone still end in tragedy? And what does justice look like when the person who committed the crime is also, in a very real sense, a victim of their own addiction? After Suzanne Henry's death, Finn Henry was charged with murder. It was a charge that reflected the severity of what had happened, the brutal nature of the attack, the fact that a woman had died at the hands of her own son. But as the case moved through the legal system, it became clear that this wasn't a straightforward murder case. This was a case about mental illness, about drug-induced psychosis, about a young man who had been so disconnected from reality that he couldn't form the intent to kill. In the UK legal system, murder requires proof of intent. The prosecution must show that the defendant intended to kill or cause serious harm. But what happens when the defendant's mind was so fractured by drugs that they couldn't form that intent? What happens when they genuinely believed they were fighting a demon, not attacking their mother? Finn Henry's defense team argued that he should be convicted of manslaughter, not murder, on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Diminished responsibility is a partial defense to murder that applies when a defendant's mental functioning was substantially impaired at the time of the killing. It doesn't excuse the crime, but it recognizes that the defendant's mental state was so compromised that they cannot be held fully responsible in the same way as someone who killed with clear intent and full awareness of what they were doing. Medical evidence supported this defense. Psychiatrists who examined Finn confirmed that he had been in a state of drug-induced psychosis at the time of the attack. They confirmed that his perception of reality had been so distorted that he genuinely believed his mother was a demon or a devil. They confirmed that he had no memory of the attack itself, that his mind had been so disconnected from his actions that he couldn't recall those 6 minutes at all. On 7th of November, the year 2023, at a hearing at Stafford Crown Court, Finn Henry pleaded guilty to manslaughter. The Crown Prosecution Service accepted the plea based on the medical evidence. The case would not go to trial for murder. Instead, Finn would be sentenced for manslaughter, a charge that carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment but allows for more flexibility based on the circumstances of the case. The sentencing hearing took place at Northampton Crown Court on 20th of May, the year 2024. It was an emotionally charged day, with Suzanne's family present to deliver victim impact statements and to hear what punishment would be handed down to the young man who had taken their loved one from them. Finn's sister and father spoke movingly about Suzanne, about the woman she had been, about the hole her death had left in their lives. They described her as the heart of their family, someone whose love and strength had held them all together. And they spoke about the unbearable pain of losing her in this way, at the hands of the son she had been trying so desperately to save. Finn's defense barrister, Ahmed Hossein KC, told the court that Finn lives with the horror of what he did every day and will continue to live with that for the rest of his life. He emphasized that Finn came from a good, decent, caring, loving, supportive family, that his mother had been his number one, the person he loved more than words could describe. He said that Finn had expressed genuine remorse, had taken full responsibility for what he had done, and had vowed never to use drugs again. He said that Finn wanted, when released, to help others avoid ending up in a similar position, to highlight the risks of drug misuse, to turn his tragedy into something that might prevent other families from experiencing the same pain. Judge Rupert Mayo, in his sentencing remarks, acknowledged the complexity and tragedy of the case. He spoke directly to Finn, saying, "Suzanne Henry started your life and brought you up in a way that was firm and fair. Your sister and your father have put forward very moving tributes to her today, and what makes this so sad and tragic is that I suspect you agree with every word they said. But you took her life. It was a life that was beyond value, and no sentence I passed can bring her back. You simply cannot value a life as special as hers." The judge noted that he was sentencing Finn on the basis that he was unlikely to have been able to form an intent to kill because of the adverse effects of the drugs he had taken, but that this did not excuse what he had done. He acknowledged that Finn was an experienced boxer, and that the assault had been lengthy, that Suzanne would have suffered greatly. But he also acknowledged that Finn had expressed genuine remorse, had taken full responsibility, and had taken steps to address his addiction to ketamine. Finn Henry was sentenced to 7 years and 4 months in prison. He was also given an extended sentence, meaning he will be subject to a 4-year license period once he is released. This means that even after he leaves prison, he will be monitored and supervised, and any breach of his license conditions could result in him being recalled to custody. In total, Finn's sentence amounts to an 11.5-year extended sentence, with 7 years and 4 months to be served in custody and 4 years on license. It's a sentence that reflects the seriousness of what happened, the fact that a woman lost her life, but also the mitigating factors, the fact that Finn was in a state of psychosis, that he had no prior history of violence, that he has shown genuine remorse and a commitment to change. So where is Finn Henry now? He is currently serving his sentence in a UK prison. The specific facility has not been publicly disclosed, but he is likely in a Category B or C prison, facilities that house inmates who are not considered high risk but still require a secure environment. He will have access to rehabilitation programs, including drug treatment and mental health support, and he will be monitored closely to ensure he is addressing the issues that led to his mother's death. The story of Finn Henry and Suzanne Henry is not just a true crime case. It's a mirror held up to some of the most pressing social issues of our time: addiction, mental health, the limits of family love, and the question of how we balance compassion with accountability. First, we need to talk about addiction. Finn's story is a stark reminder that addiction is not a choice. It's a medical condition, a disease that hijacks the brain's reward system and makes it almost impossible for someone to stop using, even when they desperately want to. Thank you for watching this video and for taking the time to engage with such a difficult and painful story. The case of Finn Henry and Suzanne Henry is one that raises profound questions about addiction, mental health, family, and justice, and there are no easy answers. But by talking about these issues, by sharing our thoughts and experiences, by supporting each other and pushing for change, we can make a difference. If you found this video informative, thought-provoking, or moving, please consider giving it a like. It helps us reach more people and continue to create content that tackles important social issues with the depth and respect they deserve. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. We cover true crime cases from across the UK, always with a focus on understanding the broader context, the human stories, and the lessons we can learn. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments.